Okay, we continue our journey on a river which is called the economic way of thinking. So today we're going to discuss chapter 3, looking behind the demand curve. In chapter 2, we led discussion about the law of demand. And the intuition behind the law of demand, it's not difficult to follow. It makes sense. For example, if the price of apples goes up, you're reluctant to give up more things to buy apples, and therefore you buy less. When the price of apples goes down, you don't have to give up so much other things to buy apples, so you buy more. So in this chapter, we will look into the nature of these decisions. In other words, we will be looking behind the demand curve to see the mechanics behind the law of demand. So in the beginning, you will be introduced to the notion of the utility, and we will define the marginal and total utility. And we will do so through the experiment. Let's assume that you are sitting in a room, and I'm coming with the with the box of chocolate bars, and I want you to try these chocolate bars. I assume that you like them. And the only condition is that when you eat a chocolate bar, you will assign on a scale, you will assign a level of your satisfaction from the bar you've eaten. And the scale is from -10 to 10. And let's assume that you are also hungry. So can you imagine, I'll give you the first chocolate bar, and you've eaten it. And you say, oh yeah, it's good. And you assign 9 points to that bar. Now I'll give you the second bar. So having eaten the first bar, you're not so hungry. You ate the second bar, and you say, yo, it's still good, but because I was not so hungry, I will assign to it 7 points. Now the third bar is coming out from the box, and you think, oh, yeah, I want to eat it. And you ate the third bar, and you say, oh, I believe I'm getting filled. Right? And of course, you realize also that the third bar adds not so much to your overall level of satisfaction. So you assign it 4.5 points. After you've eaten 3 bars, you feel that you're almost almost done, right? You are not so hungry as before. But I offer you the fourth bar, and you're thinking, oh, if I eat this bar, it will not change my level of satisfaction. So you assign the fourth bar 0, because it doesn't matter if you ate it or not, your level of fullness will not change. Okay, so you agree you've eaten the fourth bar, and then I offer you the fifth one, and you feel that if you ate the fifth bar, you will be sick, right? So yeah, of course you could, in order to avoid the sickness, you assume that you will be sick, and you don't eat it, but you will assign it -5 points. So all that experiment is captured in that diagram. You see the first bar, you rated it 9 points. The second bar, 7 points. The third, 4.5, and so on. If you look at this diagram, you will realize that all the bars that you've eaten are identical. They're all the same. But you rate them differently depending on how many of them you have already eaten. And rating points you assign to each bar can be viewed as the measure of how much each chocolate bar adds to your overall level of satisfaction. So economists have a special name to the sense of satisfaction. They call it utility. So let's add another diagram to our first one, which shows the overall level of satisfaction or total utility you get from different bars. Say, from the 2 bars, you get total 16 points. So you add up 9 and 7, and you get 16. When you add the 4th bar, it adds 0 to your overall level of satisfaction. So you see, in our diagram, total utility will not change. And when you, say, assume you've eaten the 5th bar, then if this is the case, then the 5 bars will give you a lower level of satisfaction than the 4 bars. So conclusion. We could, as a result of our experiment, we see that each additional unit of the chocolate bar, and say in general, you know, our experiment, if you make generalization, so this trend applies to practically every good we consume. So we could say that each additional unit of the item that we consume adds less and less to our overall level of satisfaction. And we call that level of satisfaction utility. And the additional utility or extra utility you get from each additional unit of an item that you consume. Economists have a special name for that. They call it marginal utility. So now we're asking a question. How many chocolate bars will you choose to eat? And if you remember, looking at our first table that described the rating points for each additional bar, you will realize that, let me bring up the table, that the, you will be indifferent between eating the 4th bar or not. So basically, the answer to the question is you will be eating 3 or 4 bars. But typically, nobody gives you the goods for free. You have to pay money for that, right? So it's a costly. So assume now that we are facing more realistic situation, and now each chocolate bar has a price of 90 cents. The question is, how many chocolate bars you will choose to eat? So we're asking this question, what we are looking for, we wanted to derive the demand curve. And remember that the demand curve is the relationship between the prices and quantities you're willing to buy at that price. So that's why we are interested of the quantities of chocolate bars you will be buying when the price of a chocolate bar is 90 cents. Before we look at the, our decision, I want you to remind very important point from the last chapter. We arrived to conclusion, remember that how much people want to buy of anything depends entirely on how much they would have to give up of other things. So now, in other words, quantity of good that people are willing to buy depends on the cost to you to buy that good in terms of the amount of goods you have to give up. Assume we have only 2 alternatives. we could buy small cookies for 30 cents each, or we could buy sticks of red licorice for 15 cents each. So now we're asking, does this information help? Yeah, it helps a little, but does it sufficient? And we realize that what we don't know how much utility or satisfaction you will receive from cookies or red licorice. So let's supply this information and assume for simplicity that each cookie is worth 2 rating points, regardless how many you eat. It's just for simplicity, right? We assume that for each cookie, you will get 2 rating points. And each stick of red licorice is worth 1 rating point. Again, regardless of on how many you eat. So now, I believe we not leave one piece of information to determine how many chocolate bars you will buy. Of course, it's your budget, money you have in your pocket. So now let's complete the picture. And you have $4.5 in your pocket, and these are prices of goods. So remember, I want to remind you that the first bar of chocolate is worth 9 points. Price of cookie and red licorice, and each cookie is worth 2 rating points, and each stick of red licorice is worth 1 rating point. So this is our initial information. So now, based on our discussion from the last chapter that amount of goods you will be buying depends on how many other things you have to give up, we're asking the question, would you shift 90 cents of your budget to buy 1 chocolate bar? So let's conduct that experiment visually. So you want to reallocate 90 cents. So assume initially you're spending all your money on cookies and red licorice, and now you want to buy 1 chocolate bar. So in terms of the money, you are allocating 90 cents. But now let's look at the reallocation in terms of the goods you gain and the goods you give up. You gain 1 chocolate bar, and you get for this 9 points. How many, say, cookies you would give up? You would give up 3 cookies, right? Because price of cookie is 30 cents. In terms of the rating points, 3 cookies will worth you 6 rating points. So you're gaining 9 and losing 6 points. Of course, reallocating the 90 cents to buy 1 chocolate bar will make you better off. Right? So you will be buying the first chocolate bar. Now let's continue experiment and see if you will be buying the second bar. So second bar, if you remember, is worth 7 points. So what will be the cost to you to get the first bar? You will be losing, again, 3 cookies, which is worth 6 points. You're gaining 7 and losing 6 points. So you make the decision, yeah, it's I will be better off, and I will be buying the second bar. So what about the third bar? The third bar, if you remember, is worth 4.5 points. So now you are familiar with the experiment. For each bar, you are gaining for the third bar, you gain 4.5 points, but you're losing 6 points. So, and looking at this situation, you would say, oh no, I wouldn't be better off to buy this third bar, right? Because my gain will be less than my loss. So conclusion, when the price is 90 cents, then you will be buying 2 chocolates. So yeah, assume we could continue that experiment and using the concept of opportunity cost to figure out how much of quantity demanded would be if the chocolate bars went on sale and the price dropped to 60 cents. So yeah, let's go through that experiment. We know that now we will be relocating each time 60 cents. For the first chocolate bar, you will get 9 points, but you will be losing 2 cookies. So 2 cookies worth 4 points. So you will be buying the first chocolate bar, right? Because the gain will be bigger than the loss. The second bar, you will get 7 rating points, and you will be losing 4 points. So you will be buying the second bar. And for the same reason, you will be buying the third bar. But if you want to buy the fourth bar, remember, will give you 0 rating points. So conclusion, when the price of the chocolate bar is 60 cents, you will be buying 3 chocolate bars. So in order for us to get information on the demand curve, we will be conducting that experiment at different prices. And we have to figure out how many of cookies or red licorice you have to give up to buy the first, second, and so on bars at different prices. So now we will put that information from our experiment on that graph. You will see the price per chocolate bar and the quantity demanded for each bar. So at the price of 90 cents, we will be buying 2 bars. At the price for 60, we will be buying 3 bars. And when the price of 0, we will be buying 4 bars. So this is the downward sloping the demand curve that you've been introduced to in chapter 2. So now we were looking at the nature, right, of the decisions that you make to get your schedule, right? How many bars you will be willing to buy at each prices. And you see that behind that schedule is your opportunity cost view on the trade-off between goods. When you gain one good, you have to give up some amount of another goods. And when you conduct that experiment, you will see you will arrive at the downward sloping the demand curve. So now what we, just the brief summary of our discussion, what we did, you've been introduced to the concept of the marginal or total utility that reflect the level of satisfaction you derive from different amount of goods. And we used marginal analysis to derive the demand curve, which you've been introduced to in chapter 2. So now we're going to introduce you to the concept of consumer surplus. So let's look at the at this graph. So this is the familiar to you the demand curve downward sloping, and I pay attention to the rectangle ABC. So this is a typical demand quantity demanded price relationship. So assume we are at point B. This is the demand for the chocolate bars, and say assume at the price is 60 cents. You remember you were buying 3 chocolate bars. But you paying 60 cents for 3 chocolate bars, although you were willing to give up $1.20 for the first bar and the 90 cents for the second bar. But you see, competition in the marketplace drive the prices, say, to this level, and you don't have to pay for price for each good that you were willing to pay. So in other words, your cost for buying 3 bars much less than the overall level of satisfaction or that you get from those 3 goods. That diagram shows you that no seller can extract from you the maximum satisfaction you derive from the goods you're buying. In our example, you were buying 3 goods, so the area of the rectangle ABC reflect the total level of satisfaction or benefits that pertains to you. So in other words, when you're buying goods on the marketplace, you're always better off because the area of ABC belongs to you. No seller can extract that additional benefit from you. So in other words, when we participate buying something in the marketplace, we are always better off. So that area is called consumer surplus. So geometrically, it shows, it confirms the idea that we discussed in chapter 1, that every individual in the marketplace behave in this self-interested fashion. So now let us use different approach to derive the demand curve. It's a little bit more technically complicated, but we will be using the same kind of experiment that we did before. So suppose that the entertainment budget for the school year is for you $150. And assume that you could use that money in only 2 ways, going to concerts or going to movies. And we are given prices for these 2 goods. Price of concert is $15, and for movie is $10. So now let's look at the different combinations of those 2 goods that you could afford. So assume if you're willing to spend all your money on movies, you will be getting 15 movies. But if you're willing to spend all your money on the concert, you will be willing to attend 10 concerts. Not willing, but you will be, right? Attending 10 concerts. So if you look at the prices, you will see that the 3 concerts, you will trade, 2 concerts, you will trade for 3 movies. So in this way, you could pick up different combinations of prices of concerts at movies that you could afford for your $150. So that information is captured on the so-called budget line. As you see over here, if you spend all your money on the concerts, you will get 10 concerts. If you spend your money on the movies, you get 15 movies. And between them, there are different combinations of concerts and movies along that line that you could afford. So if you, say, staying at this point, you can afford, say, 15 movies. Then if you get extra 2 concerts, you have to give up 3 movies. Right? So that, but that budget line that reflects bundle that of those 2 goods that are affordable to you does say which bundle you will choose. Right? So what we need to add to solve this task? To accomplish this task, we need to know something about your preferences. How much you like movies and how much you like concerts. So how you approach that problem? And of course, you have to keep in mind that the diminishing marginal utility law will be applying for each concert and for each movie. Remember the experiment with the chocolate bar. For each additional chocolate bar, you get less and less additional utility. So that trend will apply to our 2 goods. So the question is, in order for us to understand your taste, is you're asking this question. So assume how many concert tickets would you have to take away from you in order to keep you at the same level of utility if you are given 2 more movie tickets. If you say, okay, I'm willing to give up 3 concert tickets to stay at the same level of utility, then the rate of ratio between concert tickets and the movie tickets, it's 3 to 2. But it might be very well that given the different starting point, so different bundle, you will be willing to give up 6 concert tickets in exchange for 2 movie tickets. In a situation when you had less movies, right? Because why you will be given up more concert tickets for the same 2 movie tickets? Because probably you don't have more movie tickets, right? So in this situation, in your bundle, you have less movie tickets. And if you have less movie tickets, each movie ticket will give you more level of utility. So now, that information about trade-offs at different starting points is reflected on our diagram indifference curve to this table and the graph that reflects the information on the table. So these are combinations of 2 goods that provide the same level of utility. Say when you have in your bundle 2 concerts and 17 movies, and you want to get, say, extra concert, you will be willing to give up 5 movies to keep you at the same level of utility. Say if you're staying at this bundle and you want to get 1 more concert, you will be willing to give up less movies. You see, 3 movies, and so on. Why? Because the 4th concert is worth less than the 3rd concert. That's why you will be willing to give up less movies. So all these points are reflected in different curves. So indifferent curve means that any combination of the concert and movies along that line give you the same level of satisfaction or utility. So based on our discussion, we could arrive at the very important conclusion that the rate at which you are willing to trade goods depend on how many of each good you already have. An indifference curve, the slope of indifference curve. So let me bring you back to the indifference curve. You see the slope of indifference curve is getting less and less. It means for each extra concerts, you are willing to give up less and less movies because you have more and more concerts. Okay, so now we want to summarize, give you the visual view on the behavior of marginal and total utility. So that graph reflects the famous law of diminishing marginal utility, what it says. So based on our discussion, we realized that each chocolate bars gives you less and less satisfaction. First bar gives you 9 points, second bar gives you 2nd point, and so on. And that graph reflects behavior of a total utility. Although additional utility you get from additional bar is decreasing, in the beginning, these diminishing marginal utils still add, right, to the total utility. But when you're coming to this point, to the 4 bars, after the 4 bar, if you eat additional bar, then your utility get negative. And this is reflected in that segment of the total utility which goes down. On this figure, you will see the 3 indifference curves, which reflect the different level of utility. So along each curve, you have different combinations of movies and concerts that give you the same level of utility. So it's like a map. We call it indifference map. Each curve that positions a little bit higher relative to another one gives you the higher level of utility. It's like on the geographical map, you have the these figures that reflect the same level of elevation. So now we are ready to, we are equipped to derive the demand curve, putting together the budget line and the indifferent curves. So now we are just one step before the answering the final question. What is the optimal bundle that I want to choose when I have $150 in my pocket and I'm facing certain references between concerts and movies? So now we will put these 2 lines together and see what will happen. So let's first of all look at that picture. So that picture combines the budget line. So as you remember, along the budget line are bundles that you could afford. And over here, we have series of indifference curves. Say when you choose the bundle at point B, you see you could get better off when you were sliding down from point B, right? Because somewhere here will be another indifference curve which has higher level of total utility. So if you continue to sliding down from point B, you will be getting to the higher and higher level of utility until you come to point A. So this is at point A. This is the bundle that gives you the highest level of utility. Assume you want to continue down from point A, you will see that you will be kind of going down to the lower and lower level of utility. So point A, it's a point of consumer maximization. Bundle at point A gives you maximum utility for your money. So now let's build on that. And we have two graphs together. So yeah, it seems like it's a complicated picture, but we will go slowly, and you will get understanding how we get all these lines. So initially, we are staying over here. This is our point A, point of maximization. And remember, at this point, price of movie is $10, and price of concert is $15. So now, let's assume that price of concerts increases twice, from $15 to $30. If price of concert decreasing, then your budget line will be rotating. Say for the for your $150, when the price of concert is the $30, you can afford only 5 concerts. But at the same time, you could afford 15 movies because price of movies didn't change. So now we have the new budget line. And based on the position of our indifference curve, we have another maximization point over here. So now let's project these two points on that graph. You see, when the price of concert increasing, you will be willing to attend less concerts. So at price 15, you're attending 4 concerts, and at price of 30, you will be attending 3 concerts. So let us plot that information just on that graph. On that graph, we have prices and quantity of concerts. So at price 15, we willing to attend 4 concerts, and when price is 30, we are willing to attend 3 concerts. If you connect these 2 points, E and T, you will get the famous downward sloping demand curve. So yeah, this approach, one more time, confirm that the law of demand holds, and the consumers are facing downward sloping demand curve. But now we look at the behavior of demand curve from the inside, kind of like looking at the guts, right, of the demand curve. So now we want to make conclusion about all our discussion of this chapter. So first of all, we look at the decision process behind the demand curve. And when people evaluate the expected benefits and expected costs of the alternative facing them, so based on that comparison, they will make a decision which way to go. They must use some sort of a scale. Scale, it could be anything that is of value to you, say, like the points or just utilities or even dollars, if it's appropriate. Anything that you could rate the utility that you get from different goods. Another point associated with the opportunity cost, which is very important in that process. Choosing one option means giving up utility that you could have from a different option. So ultimately, the cost of buying a chocolate bar is the utility that you can't receive from spending that money on something else. So it's another expression for the opportunity cost. So when you buy a chocolate bar, you're automatically exposed to the cost to you in terms of the amount of goods and the associated utility with these goods that you will be losing. And if you look carefully at our discussion, you would note that what matters in these choices between alternatives, it's not the total utility. More importantly, the extra or marginal utility that you expect to receive from extra dollar you spend on a good. And you saw when we applied the technical geometrical approach to derive the demand curve, right? When we change the prices, we get different budget lines, and based on the position of these budget lines and in different curves, we were able to derive the downward sloping demand curve.